My mother didn't even look up from her guest list when she said it. Olivia, you understand you can't attend Chloe's wedding right. Her voice was ice. Your style, it would be too complicated for an event at the Guggenheim. My sister's $1.5 million wedding. And me, the family's complication, apparently not refined enough to be seen. They thought I would simply disappear. They had no idea. I was about to become the center of the entire evening. I stood in the middle of my mother's Upper East Side living room, the air smelling like old money and faint, expensive perfume. My mother, Patricia, didn't look up from her desk. She was addressing invitations, her pen scratching across thick cardstock. Olivia, she said, her voice as crisp as a new dollar bill, we need to be clear about Chloe's wedding. You understand, of course, that you can't actually attend. I just stood there. She finally glanced up, her eyes dismissive. The wedding is at the Guggenheim. It's costing your father and I over $1.5 million. Your style, it's just complex. Your presence would be a distraction. Complex. That was the word she used for my life, for my art, for me. Have you ever felt like the complex one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. Complex was her word for it. My word was unwanted. That's the dynamic in my family. I'm the black sheep artist, and my sister Chloe is the golden child PR executive. We're a perfect case study. Chloe lives in a Soho apartment my father pays for. She got her job at a luxury PR firm because my mother sits on their board. Her life has been a series of open doors held open by my parents' money and connections. Me, I live in Bushwick. I pay my own rent for a drafty studio by working 3 different freelance gigs. I paint, I hustle, I create. And the irony, for the last 5 years, I'm the one who has secretly designed all of my mother's sophisticated gala invitations, the very events she now uses as a standard I'll never meet. I've been the invisible engine for their aesthetic, and now I'm being told my own aesthetic is the reason I have to stay hidden. I looked at my mother, at her perfectly composed face, and I just nodded. I understand, I said, and I watched the relief wash over her face. She was so glad I wasn't going to make a scene, so glad I was going to be the sensible one, the one who just quietly disappears. But you have to understand that silence, it wasn't weakness, it wasn't acceptance, it was a survival mechanism. When you grow up in a prison that doesn't have bars, a prison of quiet comparisons, of conditional love, of constant subtle reminders that you are less than you don't learn to fight, you learn to survive. You learn that fighting back only makes the walls feel closer. So you stay quiet, you nod, you make yourself small. You become an expert at disappearing in plain sight, just to keep the peace, just to get through the day. My silence was a chain I'd been wrapping around myself for 20 years, a chain of learned helplessness that I'd mistaken for strength. My mother saw my nod, and she smiled, a tight, satisfied little smile. Good, she said, turning back to her invitations. I knew you'd be sensible about this. I didn't say another word. I just picked up my bag and walked out, the sound of her pen scratching against the paper echoing behind me. I walked out of that marble lobby and into the bright, sharp afternoon. I didn't take a cab. I took the 6 train downtown, the rattle of the subway car, a welcome change from the suffocating silence of my mother's apartment. The Upper East Side always felt like a foreign country, a place where I had to pretend to shrink, to apologize for the paint under my fingernails. When I got off the train in Bushwick, the air felt different. It tasted like exhaust and possibility. I walked past the murals, the street art, the vibrant, chaotic life I had chosen, and I felt the anger finally start to thaw. It wasn't a hot anger. It was cold. It was clarifying. My mother thought my style was complex. She thought I was a distraction. She was about to find out how distracting I could be. I got to my studio and looked out the window. Across the street was an old textile mill, and on the third floor, a massive loft space had been empty for months. A "For Rent" sign hung in the window. A crazy idea, a beautiful, terrible idea, started to form in my mind. I pulled out my phone and called Destiny. She's my best friend, a brilliant broke curator who understood the art world's hypocrisy better than anyone. She picked up on the second ring. "Liv, what's wrong? You sound structured." "They're having the wedding," I said, no preamble. 1.5 million at the Guggenheim. "And I'm not invited." Destiny was silent for a beat. Then she just said, "Good. So you're free that weekend." That's what I was thinking. Chloe's getting married on June 15th. I think we should throw a party. Thank God you're not at that wedding party I'm in." "No," I said, looking at the empty loft across the street. "A show. A real show. A pop-up exhibit on the exact same night." Destiny went quiet again, but this time I could hear her mind working. A pop-up on the same night as the Guggenheim Gala. Liv, that's not just a show, that's a statement. "It's a counter-narrative," I said. "But there's a problem. The loft across the street, it's perfect, but it's going to cost at least $10,000 to rent it, light it, and get enough cheap wine to make it look legitimate." "10,000, she sighed. "We don't have 10,000. We barely have 1,000. I know. And just like that, the anger evaporated, replaced by the familiar cold reality of my bank account. I had about $5,000 saved, my entire life's cushion. It wasn't enough. I was about to tell her to forget it, that it was a stupid idea, when my phone buzzed with an email. It was a notification from my art collective's payment portal. "A new donation has been processed. Amount $10,000. Donor anonymous." I stared at the screen. I didn't say anything. "Liv, you still there?" "Someone," I said, my voice shaking, "someone just donated $10,000. "What? Who?" "It just says anonymous." Before I could even process it, another notification lit up my screen. A text message from a number I didn't recognize, but the name was saved in my phone from a group text Chloe had sent months ago. "Trevor, Chloe's fiancé." The message was short. "I've been following your work for years, Olivia. Huge fan. I heard you were planning something special for the 15th. Good luck. The art world needs more voices like yours." I dropped my phone. Destiny was yelling my name through the speaker. Trevor, the golden fiancé. He knew. And he had just funded my rebellion. The night of June 15th. The entire city was divided into two worlds. My world and theirs. Up at the Guggenheim, the night began. I saw pictures later. It was exactly what you'd expect. Cold, perfect, and breathtakingly expensive. The museum's white rotunda was uplit in a soft champagne-colored glow. Guests in $1,000 gowns drifted across the polished floor, holding flutes of champagne, their voices hushed. My mother Patricia was in her element, air-kissing politicians and old money trustees. My father Gregory stood beside her, beaming, accepting congratulations on securing such a brilliant match for his daughter. And Chloe. She looked stunning, of course. A custom Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than my college education. But in the few photos I saw, she wasn't smiling. She was tense. She kept glancing at her phone, her thumb nervously refreshing a screen, waiting for news from an event she wasn't supposed to care about. Then there was Bushwick. There was no champagne-colored lighting, just $200 floodlights we'd rented buzzing as they lit up the raw brick walls. There was no string quartet, just a playlist Destiny had made blasting through a speaker that kept cutting out. It wasn't cold. It was hot. It was packed. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, cheap wine, and the unmistakable electric energy of something real happening. Our $10,000 had bought us 5 cases of Trader Joe's wine, a mountain of cheese cubes, and this glorious raw industrial space. And it was full. Destiny had done her job. She'd called in every favor. The loft was crammed with every young critic gallery, assistant blogger, and art world influencer in Brooklyn. They weren't there for polite conversation. They were there to see something. At 8 p.m., on the dot, Destiny signaled to me. I walked to the center of the room where my centerpiece was covered by a massive drop cloth. I grabbed the rope. I pulled. The cloth fell away, and the room went silent for just a second before it exploded. It was my self-portrait, 10 feet tall, but it wasn't me in a gown. It was me in my paint-splattered jeans and combat boots. And I was sitting on a throne I had built myself over the last 2 weeks, welded together from rebar broken mirrors, discarded subway parts, and rusty pieces of a fire escape. In the painting, my expression wasn't smiling. It was a direct, challenging, unapologetic stare. I wasn't asking for permission. I was claiming my space. I called it Throne of Scraps. The energy in that room was everything the Guggenheim was not. It was loud. It was alive. It was dangerous. And we were just getting started. I didn't check my phone for the first hour. I just watched. I watched people see the art. I listened to the buzz, the raw energy of a room discovering something new. Then, at 9:15 p.m., while the main course was being served at the Guggenheim, I pulled out my phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't check my family's feed. I opened my own Instagram. Destiny had taken a photo about 20 minutes earlier. It was perfect. The lighting was dramatic, catching the glint of broken mirror in my throne. I was standing in front of it, not smiling, just looking straight into the lens. The crowd behind me was a perfect blur of energy and motion. I typed the caption. Every letter felt deliberate, clinical. You don't need an invitation to the gala to be the main event. I hit post. I didn't wait to see the first likes come in. I put my phone back in my pocket and grabbed another plastic cup of wine. I had done the work. Now the work would do its job. The energy in the room shifted. Within minutes, phones were lighting up. People were looking from their screens to the painting and back to me with a new understanding. The post wasn't just getting likes. It was being shared. Rapidly. Now, picture the Guggenheim. 20 blocks north, but 1,000,000 miles away. Arthur Vance, the most feared art critic in New York, was bored. He was sitting at table 3, pushing a piece of lukewarm $60 salmon around his plate. He was trapped at a wedding he'd only attended because the bride's mother, Patricia, was a relentlessly annoying member of the museum's acquisitions board. His phone buzzed under the table. It wasn't a text. It was a direct message on Instagram from an anonymous account he recognized, a secret account that had sent him tips before. An account he knew belonged to Trevor the groom. The message contained a single link to my post and an address in Bushwick. Arthur opened it. He saw the painting. He saw the raw, angry, beautiful throne made of city trash. He read the caption, You don't need an invitation to the gala to be the main event. He looked across the room. He saw Chloe the bride posing for yet another photo, her smile frozen and perfect. He saw the sterile $1.5 million room. Then he looked back at his phone. He saw the art. He saw the story. He saw where the real energy was. He stood up. He didn't make an excuse. He didn't say goodbye to the table. Arthur Vance, the man whose opinion could make or break a career, just picked up his coat. He walked past my mother, who was mid-laugh with a city councilman. He walked right out the massive doors of the Guggenheim, leaving a wake of confused silence and a half-eaten piece of salmon. He was going to Brooklyn. He was going to see the main event. I didn't sleep. How could I? I spent the entire night on the worn-out couch in my Bushwick loft, the smell of stale wine and spray paint hanging in the air. The adrenaline from the party from the show was gone. It was replaced by that hollow, buzzing exhaustion you get after a battle, when you're just waiting to see if you've won or lost. Destiny was already awake, hunched over her laptop at my small kitchen table. The silence in the studio was louder than the party had been. I was waiting. I didn't know what for, but I knew something had changed. Destiny suddenly stopped scrolling. She didn't gasp. She didn't shout. She just froze. "Liv," she said, her voice quiet. "Get over here. Now." I walked over my bare feet cold on the concrete floor. She turned the laptop toward me. It was the New York Times, the arts and culture section, the front page. The headline wasn't just a headline. It was a coronation. The gala that wasn't how a pop-up in a warehouse became the only art event that mattered. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the laptop. I read Arthur Vance's words. He didn't just review my show, he eviscerated the alternative. He called the Guggenheim wedding a sterile $1.5 million performance of wealth. He described it as an empty cathedral, celebrating nothing but its own reflection. And then he wrote about me. He called my pop-up raw vital and an urgent necessary response to the polished emptiness of the uptown art scene. He analyzed the throne of scraps painting the centerpiece. He called me the most authentic voice to come out of New York in a decade. The article didn't just mention my sister's wedding. It used it as a footnote, a punchline. The $1.5 million party, the event I wasn't refined enough to attend, had been completely and totally overshadowed. My phone started ringing. It vibrated violently on the kitchen table, the screen flashing a name I hadn't seen in months. Chloe. I looked at Destiny. She just raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across her face. I answered, and I put it on speaker. You. The voice that came through the speaker wasn't human. It was a shriek, thin and cracking with rage. You did this on purpose. You ruined it. You ruined everything. I held the phone an inch from my ear. Hello, Chloe. Don't you, hello, Chloe, me. The New York Times Arthur Vance he left my wedding to go to your filthy art project in that warehouse. I waited. I let her scream. I could practically hear my mother in the background wailing about how this was all so complex. This was supposed to be my day, she cried, her voice breaking. My moment. We spent $1.5 million. And now the only thing anyone is talking about is you. My phone is blowing up. People are asking why my wedding wasn't as authentic as yours. You stole my moment. I let the silence hang in the air for a long, cold second after her tirade. I didn't ruin anything, Chloe, I said. My voice was quiet. Clinical... What? What did you say? I said I didn't ruin anything. You did. I did what? You did this, I said, my voice as calm as ice. You're the one who decided I wasn't refined enough to be at your wedding. You're the one who told me my style was too complex for your guests. I took a slow breath. You didn't want me in the room, Chloe. You can't be angry that I decided to build my own. I hung up the phone. I stared at the New York Times article again. Destiny just looked at me, that slow smile still on her face. Well, she said, pouring 2 cups of coffee, that's that. It wasn't victory. It was just accounting. The scales were finally balanced. My phone didn't ring for 6 months. My family didn't call. I didn't either. I was too busy. The Times article wasn't just a review. It was a launch pad. My inbox, which used to be empty, save for late rent reminders, was now an avalanche of offers. Galleries in Berlin, collectors in LA brand, collaborations I didn't even understand. My work, once confined to the brick walls of Bushwick, was suddenly in demand. The throne of scraps, my centerpiece, the painting of me on that salvaged throne, sold for a price that still makes my head spin. 6 figures. The buyer was anonymous, of course. My mother was convinced I'd made it all up until the money cleared. I found out later, through a quiet confirmation from the gallery director, who the buyer was. Trevor, my sister's husband, the man who had anonymously funded my pop-up show. He hadn't just given me the $10,000 to start the fire. He had bought the ashes for $100,000 more. He wasn't just an ally. He was my biggest collector. I never mentioned it to him. He never mentioned it to me. Some things are louder when they aren't said. Now, I stood in a massive white-walled gallery in Chelsea. My first official solo show. The curator was fussing over the lighting on a new piece. A massive canvas of chaotic, vibrant color. It felt 1,000,000 miles away from that cold living room on the Upper East Side. I looked at my bank account. The numbers didn't feel real. I had enough money to buy my own apartment to travel, to never worry about the rent on my studio again. I could have just taken the win. I could have enjoyed the silence from my family, knowing they were choking on my success. But that's the thing. When you finally get the power, you realize how empty it is to just hold it. The victory over Chloe already felt like old news. It wasn't justice. It was just a consequence. I realized there are 2 kinds of justice. There's the justice of the storm, the kind that tears down a rotten structure. It's loud, it's necessary, and it's satisfying. It's the justice of punishment. We crave it because it balances the scales. That was the Times article. That was Chloe's phone call. But then there's the second kind, the justice of the sower, the justice of the person who plants a seed in the scorched earth left behind. It's the justice of creation. It's slow, it's quiet, and it's the only kind that actually builds a future. It's not about balancing the scales. It's about building a new set of scales entirely. I knew what I had to do. I took a significant portion of the money from the sale of Throne of Scraps, and I established the Pop-Up Fund, a grant designed to give $5,000, no $10,000, to any artist who feels unseen, giving them the cash to rent a space, buy supplies, and throw their own opening night. My act of defiance wasn't just my story anymore. It was becoming a blueprint. This video, this story, it isn't really about me or my family. It's about you. It's a letter to every person who has ever been made to feel like they were on the fringes. To the one who was told they were too complex, too loud, too quiet, or not refined enough to sit at the main table. It's for the person who has spent their life shrinking themselves to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold them. I'm here to tell you one thing. Stop waiting for an invitation. Stop waiting for them to finally see your worth. They won't. Not because you aren't worthy, but because they are incapable of seeing it. Your value is not determined by their validation. So let them have their gala. Let them have their perfect, polished, empty rooms. You go find your warehouse. You go find your people. You go build your own throne out of whatever scraps you can find. And when you're ready, you send out your own invitation. Because your art, your voice, your life, that is the main event. You don't need their permission to be the masterpiece.